as a discussion platform, but I'm going to tell you why we do what we do. And I'm going to talk about the work we're doing to help you take your data, the data you already have, and make it useful to people every day in a way that's going to create value for your organization. And I think there's bits of what Sylvia said and bits of what Sunil said at the end there, which is about, the ambition is exactly the same, but it's how can we actually do that as leaders in HR and leaders in people technology. And the title of my presentation is actually stolen from a TED talk by Margaret Heffernan that I'm going to reference later, but I'd urge you all to go and watch Margaret Heffernan's The Big Impact of Small Changes on the TED website, which is a great talk. And you'll see why I like it when you see what we do. If I click this, now I've lost my, how do I move a slide on? Slide 2. Have I changed slides or not? No. Sorry. You can see that. Great. So our story starts here at Hilton College, which is a private school in South Africa, about 20 years ago, where my business partner, Paul, was at high school. And Paul's frustration as he went into his final year at high school was that all the junior kids knew the senior kids and the senior kids didn't know the junior kids. And that made it very hard for him to create connections with these people. And he became very aware and frustrated by the impact that had on himself and his inability to engage with people as he walked past them. And also on the young kid that he was walking past. He was aware of the impact. And he would walk past a young kid and say, "Hey, Jack, how was your sports game at the weekend?" That kid's face would light up and they'd feel recognized and known and validated versus not knowing them at all. And he went to his head teacher and said, "Can I make a book with the names and faces of every kid in the school? Really simple directory book." And the head teacher said, "I think you're crazy, but go for it." So he goes when he makes these books. And they're really popular. They're a hit. They're a very simple repository of this information. And it struck him that prior to that point, he hadn't known where to go to get that reliable information, to create that bond, to break down the silos that are so common in schools. You know the people in your form, or you know the people in your sports team, but you don't know the other people. And he's been making those books every year since then, 17 years later. This is my old office. Thank goodness it is my old office. I was managing director at an ad agency of about 400 people in London. And this is the office of the holding company, which was 4,000 people. As managing director, I felt it was my job to create the conditions where people could do their best work. And that involved making people feel valued and recognized and included. So you can begin to see why, even though Paul and I have known each other for 20 years, we ended up starting a company together. It also involved giving people the tools to collaborate and to do their best work. But too often, what I actually experienced when I was managing director here was this. Now, I think I'm slightly better than the character in this. I never actually introduced myself to any of my own employees, although I have heard people tell me that has happened to them. But it was far more the excruciating, painful moments of getting into a lift and someone saying, "Hi, Rich, how you doing?" And think, I just don't know who that person is. And there's only so many times big man or mate can cut it before they know that you don't know, and before you know it's too late in your relationship to ask that person who they are. And I don't want this to be simply an exercise in avoiding awkwardness. I think it's much, much more fundamental than that. And I go back to Julia and Sunil's talk just now about these informal leaders in your business and these network leaders in your business. The title of my talk is The Big Impact of Small Changes. And I think, I've jumped way forward. Sorry, let me go back. I don't know how that happened. Margaret Heffernan's book is called The Big Impact of Small Changes. And she says this, she says, "Helpfulness is absolutely core to successful teams, and it routinely outperforms individual intelligence. Helpfulness means I don't have to know everything. I just have to work among people who are good at getting and giving help. And what drives helpfulness is people getting to know each other." It is why companies do still, although they do it in a much more politically correct way, do town hall meetings on a Thursday night and give everyone a drink afterwards. It's why we have budgets for away days and activities. It's why it's not just why, but it's partly why we give people tea and coffee making facilities. It's so that we can create the ability for these informal nodes to exist within a community. So I think Margaret Heffernan, if you watch her TED Talks, talks about this in more detail. She talks about the power of those relationships. It might begin with an informal conversation. It might move to a conversation about, oh, what are you working on? And what you break down is the siloed holding of information within an organization. So I think we can agree it's what happens between people in organizations that matters. That feels like it's been something of a theme in the talks we've had so far. There's a recent HBR survey that says, I think 86% of CEOs say that human capital or people are the most important thing in their organization and the relationships in their organization. Can't keep moving. I'm unable to control this this machine, but here we go. Right. Okay. So it's what happens between people that matters. Okay. So here is a chart from Workday's own sales deck. This is everything you can do in Workday. Sylvia mentioned Workday. Workday is great. I should suggest to say that we integrate with Workday. I think it's an amazing tool. But here is a list of everything that it does, which is 50 different things. This is me, and this is me at work. So the first is me at home, and this is me at work. And I am the same person, okay? I do not change when I walk through the doors of work. I use the same language. And my experience of tools as a dad and as a private individual, the tools that I love are tools that do one thing really well and are really easy to use, and I can just snap in and out of. I use Uber for instant rides. I use Google Maps for maps. I use Slack for internal messaging. I use Zoom for video. To labor the point, I don't use Slack for video calls, even though it has the video calls capability. I don't use Uber for maps, even though it has the maps capability. And yet, we as HR professionals ask everybody to use a tool that is designed for us, for themselves. And the result is that we say use it for all of these different things. And the result is they don't know where to begin. They don't know how to use it. And we spend time analyzing how they use it and looking for increments of how we can improve that, rather than recognizing that there is a different problem that we've created, which is a point of access and a point of distribution, particularly for the problem that we solve. So what I'd ask you, first of all, to think about is what's for me when I look at data and I look at tools, and what's for them? What's the data that can actually add value to my business that people will use? And what's the data that I, as an HR professional, need to do my job well? And I think it's really important that we don't confuse those two things, because they are two different things. And I think that part of our roles as HR professionals is to serve our people and give them the tools to do their job well. And part of it then is to analyze that information and to continue to drive improvement. So this is what we do. Of the, I think, 58 things on the Workday chart, people find workers. And again, I'm so pleased that Julia and Sunil talked about what they talked about, because they just highlighted what an important thing it is in an organization to be connected and to know who people are. If I go back to 2008, I was working on the Mars advertising business, and they bought Wrigley for $23 billion. And I remember saying to my client, that's amazing. You've just bought an enormous company. You've bought the biggest gum manufacturer in the world. And he said to me, we haven't actually. We bought a distribution network in Asia and South America, because Wrigley had literally put salespeople on bikes and taken them to the remotest parts of the world to sell gum. And what they wanted to do was to take chocolate to those places. They had just vastly increased the distribution network. And I'll explain why this is important in a second. This is a chart from Nokia, which shows the growth of voice against data traffic over 2007 on the left-hand side to 2017. So voice is the little red one. So it increases slightly, but it's basically flat. Data obviously experiences exponential growth. And the reason for that exponential growth in data usage is this: it's the iPhone. So prior to the iPhone, we're all hacking around on Blackberries, having sort of shitty access to the internet. And then Steve Jobs introduces the iPhone, and access to the internet becomes incredibly easy, really straightforward. You're just on and you're away. And it increases as 3G and 4G arrive. Okay, so ease of access is the answer here. And the other benefit of ease of access is quality of data. So this is the number of websites in the world over the last 20 years. And again, you can see there is a correlation. The arrival of the iPhone correlates with the quality of the data, the amount of data, but also the quality of the data in the world that people can access. And that data grows and improves because it's worth creating. It's worth making good because people can access it easily. So I know this is a grandiose explanation of what we do, but again, Google, they don't produce anything. I'm talking about Google search here. They just index all of the information in the world with a search bar that hasn't changed in 20 years. And they do it with a sort of home screen once you've searched that hasn't changed in 20 years. They just do it very, very well. And I think the point we're making here is ease of access to information drives usage and in turn drives quality of that data. What we have tried to do at Names and Faces, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can do that and share a different screen, which is my phone. What we've tried to do at Names and Faces is take data that people use and need every day and make it instantly accessible. Okay, so you can see my phone. That's my son. He's watering the tomatoes. He used to be English and now he's Californian. It's a disappointing transition. Names and Faces is this app here. Okay, so if I am about to walk into a meeting with someone I don't know, or jump on a Zoom call with someone I don't know, or I'm down at a client and I need to reach out to someone in the organization, or I know what I want in the organization, but I don't know who can help. Currently, if I'm using Workday or Active Directory or UltiPro, I don't even know where to begin to get that information. But if I go into Names and Faces, I open onto a home screen of my organization. I can tap on all people and I can find people in the way that humans search, which is visually. And I can see, okay, that's her, that's Judith, she's head of sales. She always says hello in the lift. I know who she is. Or I can filter and say, show me someone in customer success in the Chicago office. And I can apply that filter and I can find those two people. And I can tap on James, suitably a data analyst, and I have the basic information about him so that I can reach him through Slack, through email, through mobile, through the tools that I already use. So what I'm doing is I'm breaking down the barrier to this information that people need every day. And I am making it as accessible as possible to people. And in the process, I'm simply using data that my organization already has in Workday, already has in Slack, already has in Active Directory. And I'm just giving it to people, humans who have 3 kids on the beach on Sunday, in a form that they're prepared to use and able to use. And this is the kind of result that we see as a result of doing that. So where Paul was at school at Hilton College in South Africa, their clients, the school principal has used Names and Faces 717 times in the last 12 months. So that's like twice a day, including school holidays, to see who the kids are around him, to make sure that as a school principal, he has that human connection with the kids around him. Or we see at my old advertising agency, who are clients, because I forced them to be clients, no, because they like the tool, but I also forced them to be clients, that a 400-person agency, Names and Faces is accessed every 4 minutes of the working day because people need this information. And once it's accessible, they can't get enough of it. And they're breaking down those silos and barriers, and they're creating those informal connections and the informal leaders that Sunil talked about. And it's a problem for everyone, from the CEO to the new joiner, to the informal leaders, to the HR directors. Is like, who are the people around me and how do I find out? Where's my simple list of these people? My parting shot is, you have enough data. Don't be tempted to find a tool that's going to give you more data. My shot is, use the data that you have to add value. The biggest danger in a data-driven world is that we think more is better. I think less of good quality data used well is the answer to our sort of data analytics problems and challenges. There you go. I used all 15 minutes and no time for questions. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's all